Welcome to the first episode of First Year Pros. Today, our guest is Conor Bollinger, an amazing athlete and a brave soul to be the first guest on this channel. Let's give him a warm welcome and get started. Excited to get this series kicked off and to hear your story. So let's get started with just a brief introduction, who you are, where you're from, and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Zach. I know we met, what was it, last year?
We met a couple
Yeah,
times, I
or
think, but the last one was in Augusta.
yeah, we met at 70.3 Worlds when it was out here in St. George the first time. And I
Yeah.
appreciate you asking me to come on here and being the first guest. My name's Conor Bollinger, for those of you that don't know. I'm 31 years old. I'm from originally Orange County, New York, which is about 60 miles north of Manhattan. And I grew up playing sports my whole life, football, lacrosse, primarily in high school. And I actually I got into triathlon in 2014, September of 2014. I did a local race. So this will be my eighth season, full season as a triathlete. And yeah, that's basically the background of me. I mean, I'm the second youngest of nine boys. I
Oh, that's a
recently had a
lot. Oh my
daughter on
gosh.
Christmas.
Oh, that's a
Yeah, I
lot of
recently
kids.
had a daughter on Christmas, and yeah, and I got two Chihuahuas. So that's me. I live in St. George, Utah now currently, to answer your question.
All right. Congrats on the kids, on the Chihuahuas as well. And so you were in Boulder for a while, but now you're out in Utah.
So I was actually I was living in Charlotte before I moved out here, but when I first met you, I went and I spent 2 months, or I would say it was in between 2 months. I spent like 6 weeks in Boulder and then 2 or 3 weeks in Salt Lake City. And that was strategic actually, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, but I went out there before 70.3 Worlds because at the time I wasn't sure where I was in the sport in terms of like what I wanted out of it and where I could, reach my potential. So I went out and I stayed at Rudy von Berg was actually in Europe at the time for the Collins Cup, and he lives with like a bunch of other either retired pros or current pro triathletes. So they had an extra room, and I went out and trained with them, stayed in Rudy's house. And then before Worlds, I went over to my buddy Clodian, who was on his way out of the age group racing, and he was going to start to be a pro. And this was his last age group race. So I went out and stayed with him in Salt Lake. And I guess that's when I met you, and I probably was talking about that, so it might have been confusing. But yeah,
Yeah.
anyways, I was living in Charlotte for like 2 years before I moved to St. George last year, actually a year to this day.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the whole Boulder area is basically like the hub for triathlon across the country. So I think there was some of the reason I thought that you were there. But yeah, it was great to see you out in Salt Lake. I'm definitely looking forward to the next time that we get to meet in person as well. I want to quickly jump back to some of your story on how you got there. So you say you've been in the sport for about 8 years now. What was your first triathlon 8 years ago? And then how did you sort of progress up to the different levels of triathlon, the different race distances, and then ultimately deciding that you wanted to go pro?
Yeah, I would say my story is nothing unique. Everyone thinks their story is unique, but being in the sport for 8 years and coaching triathletes myself, I realized my story is just like everybody else's. My buddy, I was living in an apartment, no living room, just 3 bedrooms with two of my buddies from high school. We were all out of college, and we were living in the East Village of Manhattan. And one of my buddies comes in and he's like, "Hey, I'm gonna go to a triathlon in Staten Island. Like, do you want to come?" And I was like, "I don't know what that is. Like, no, I don't want to go." Like, basically, like, at the time I was like lifting weights. I was started jogging because I was like reading, I think I read Born to Run or something like that. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh, like, genetically we're built to be endurance athletes. So I started running. And then long story short, that same roommate who I grew up with, he's like, dude, there's a triathlon in our hometown, Newburgh, New York, which is on the Hudson River, just an hour north. And he's like, why don't we train for this and do it? So at the time I was bartending and I had a lot of expendable income in terms of cash. So I was like, you know what? I started like training. I started swimming. I swam, started learning how to swim in a 22-yard pool in Times Square
Oh
at
God, that
the
sounds
New York Health Club. It was bath water. It was terrible.
oof.
So anyways, like I got into triathlon. I was just fully just immersed in the sport and I bit the bug like without ever even doing one. So I went down to the Specialized dealer and I bought a Shiv, a $4,000 bike, all cash, just because I had all this cash on me. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to rent a bike. Like, I don't want a road bike because I kind of knew at that time my roommate had a road bike. So I've been on road bikes. And I was like, you know, triathlon's interesting because I was bartending, like I said at the time, and I was talking to this guy, and every triathlete I met superficiously, I was like, this guy is in great shape. And the more I thought about it, the more on paper I realized I'm like, triathlon really does combine three of the best aspects of the aesthetic of athletes. You have, the cardiovascular system and the leanness of runners. You have the legs of a cyclist. You have the back and upper body of a swimmer. So fundamentally, on a very superficial visual perspective, I was like, these athletes look healthy and they're put together compared to the other three disciplines if you were to itemize them out. So before I even did a triathlon, I was invested in it, which is really bizarre because it foreshadowed, the next 10 years of my life. So I did my first race and, I had a fuel belt on. It was an Olympic distance. It was downriver swim. So I didn't know any better. I was just like, oh, well, this is, a mile, whatever.
Yeah.
So you get in
Downriver
there,
swim
you
is
do
not a
it.
bad way to start.
Yeah, exactly. Like an Olympic distance, is a great beginner distance, especially with a current assisted swim. So I had this feeling about 4 miles into the run where you realize you're going to finish because there's all these questions like, can I do this? You don't know the perspective because perspective is everything. And so when I felt like I was going to finish, with my fuel belt with like, 20 ounces of water on me for a 10K, I was like, wow, I'm going to do this. I came in 13th out of like, 30, and I qualified for age group nationals. So at the time, I'm like, I'm the shit. I qualified for age group nationals. So perspective is everything. That's going to be
Yep.
the theme
Yep.
of this interview. So when I was bartending, the owner of the restaurant group was a triathlete, and I told him I was doing a triathlon. And this is a legacy guy. He was in his 50s at the time. So he's like, oh, well, I actually train at Chelsea Piers, which is a gym in New York City. It's one of the only gyms that has their own private 25-yard lane lap pool. And he was like, let me introduce you to the coach. So I get introduced to this coach, and this guy is a very intense individual. He was an ex-American gladiator. His name is Scott Berlinger. In the 80s, he did the American Gladiators. He ended up being the first commentary color man for UFC in the 90s. He's a jiu-jitsu black belt, and he started the first ever USA Triathlon Training Center on the East Coast at Chelsea
Wow.
Piers. So this guy, he comes up to me, and he looks at me square in the eyes, and he's like, how'd you get into the sport? And I was like, oh, well, I did my first triathlon a couple of weeks ago. I qualified for nationals. And he goes, congrats, so did everybody else. And
Yep.
I
Yeah.
I
I remember
remember
the first
that
time I
comment so
qualified.
well
Yep.
because I
Yeah.
remember him saying that so well because it shook me. I was like, oh shit. And that was the first time it was put into perspective that there's levels to this sport.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that I didn't know what I didn't know at the time. So what I did was I just totally immersed myself with this training club. And they're one of the biggest on the East Coast. It's called Full Throttle Endurance. And they to their own credit, they built a great little community there. And so my first few years in the sport, I only was interested in short course, sprint, Olympic, all this stuff. I had no idea about long course. I thought it was out of my reach. I thought I wasn't there yet. I thought it was an old person sport, long course. So the next 3 or 4 years, I did every race that you could sign up for. I raced about 40 times in about 4 to 5 years.
Wow. That's
There
a lot of
wasn't a
races.
thing there. Yeah, there was a lot of races. I would race back to back. I would go to the bar. I would shut down the nightclub, clean up at 5 a.m, go home, eat a bagel, then drive out to the race because that's just kind of how I had to live my life at the time. I was like nocturnal. I would like get home at 6 a.m, or I would go right to the pool to swim, do a workout, then go home to sleep, or go home to sleep, wake up at like 2 in the afternoon, go do my workouts, and then go to the bar. Or the nightclub, wherever I was working at the time, which was great. It was an interesting life, you know what I mean? But it's not a sustainable life. So there was a time in my professional career where I needed to get an actual job, benefits job, like, and I had a great offer come thrown my way. But part of the offer was you got to move out of New York City. So that was around 2016, actually. I remember it was right after the election because, New York City was chaos around that time. Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, both New Yorkers. I can't forget it. So I move out of the city, and I have this weird relationship with triathlon. It's like, I've established myself into being like a sub 205 Olympic guy. Like I could sign up for a race, I go sub 205. Like that was a great goal, but I didn't like. And I thought Team USA was like the end all be all. Like I would go to nationals for all those years in Omaha. I would do that race. I would do poorly at the race. I didn't know about training because all I ever known was this little bubble I had at Chelsea Piers at Full Throttle Endurance, which, I'm not going to throw shade at them. It just, they were kind of hindering my growth in that sense because it was mostly people in their 40s or 50s, professionals, business professionals, I should say, like people that were doing it as a hobby.
Sure.
And I was torn because I wasn't really sure where I wanted to take it. Like, is this a hobby or is this something that I could see through to something else? And even in 2016, I really didn't have that mindset where it was like, oh, I could get to the next level. It was like, well, I think it's time that I do a 70.3. So
here we
go. Yeah. So
yeah.
At 2016, I end up moving abroad to Ireland for this company that I worked for, and for 8 months, and I really didn't do much there. I just trained. I brought both my bikes. I swam it was Limerick, Ireland, the west coast of Ireland, the third largest city. So it was really cool. You're not in Dublin. It's not like an international city. It's as local as you can get in Ireland. And so I didn't do much. I just trained at the local university, 50-meter lap pool. The roads were kind of terrible. It rained every day. It did a lot of indoor, swimming. And sorry if I'm rambling, but
no, keep it. Love the story. The point of this is to share your story.
Yeah. So I did my first 70.3. So sorry, I basically was just training to do a 70.3 when I was there. So I do my first 70.3 at Raleigh. I think it was 2017 Raleigh or 2016 in Raleigh.
If it was 2018, then we would have been in the same race there without knowing it. The Raleigh 70.3 was actually my first race right when I graduated college.
Okay. Yeah. So that was my first 70.3. And I've already had all these Olympics under my belt because when I got into the sport, and this is going back to my mentality, I was like, this is a sport I don't know anything of, and talking with people, they're like, you got to get your sport IQ up, just like everything else. So race as much as possible. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to get that muscle memory down because if you look at it, like a lot of these 70.3 pros, they come from short course distance. It's a lot less to invest in and a lot less pressure to just go do a local whatever to get your race IQ up. So I raced as much as I could. And then I was like, all right, I think I'm ready for a 70.3. I've been in this sport for 3 or 4 years. Like, I think it's time. So I didn't know about pacing or nutrition or anything. Ooh. So I go out and, I swim like a 32 and I bike a 220 and then I run a 148. And then I end up doing like a 450 or 445, whatever it was for my first half. And, comparably to the Olympics and the sprints, I did really bad in my age group. I was like, wow, like I didn't even break the top 20 of my age group. Like, holy crap. Like this is a whole nother world here. So I kind of still I was really discouraged because ego played a role. I was like, well, I do really well in these short courses. Like maybe I'll just become a short course specialist, which unless you're going to the Olympics, what is that? You know what I mean? At the time, Lifetime had their Olympic Pro series, but that kind of was, there's only like 3 or 4 races. But anyway, it's like, so I was living in Ireland and then I go and do Dubai. And then my brother lives in Dubai, so that's why I went there. It was like a very, I didn't have to pay for housing. I didn't have to pay for car. All I had to basically pay was airfare, flight, and destination race.
Yep.
Awesome. So I go to Dubai, and this is like my first time actually training for 70.3 compared to Raleigh. Like I really didn't know how to train for it. So now I kind of have perspective of what it takes to go fast. And I ended up going 4:30 there, like
Nice.
4:31, whatever it was. But I missed qualifying for Worlds by 10 seconds because I came fourth in my age group and they gave top three to go to
Yeah.
Worlds. So that like really, and the Felici brothers. So there were these twin brothers in my age group. The one came second and the one came third. And I missed the third slot to the last Felici brother. I'll never
Mm,
forget this because of the name Felici. So I lost 70.3 worlds at the time, and my world was crushed. Like my brother
yeah.
was there, his friends were there. I thought I was hot shit, and I go and I miss worlds, and then yeah, once again a little bit discouraged. To like, this sport's hard. So triathlon's really good at dangling the carrot. It keeps you wanting more. So I moved back to the States. I moved to upstate New York, Saratoga Springs. There's not much going on up there. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to see what else I can do in the sport. I basically hunkered down. I had a job with the salary, benefits, all the good stuff. I had everything around me set up for success. If I could just like manage my time and training, I could do this.
Yep.
So another year goes by where I go to Australia for age group worlds. I do subpar once again there. Nothing spectacular. I might have PR'd the 10K, which was cool, but at the end of the day, what does that mean?
Yep.
Like, you finish 17th in your age group at age group worlds. Like, what does that mean? It means nothing. Um, and so this is all coming to a point here. So I was in the best shape of my life, like ripped, muscular, body fat percentage, like all of that. It looked great aesthetically. And then I moved to Charlotte because you can't really train year round in upstate New York. It's really
Yep.
cold. So I was looking for a better place to train because I was still in love with the sport, even though I knew like I really was like a skid mark in the entire sport. Like no one really knew who I was. Like, in Saratoga, I was like the big man on campus because I was winning races, I was breaking local
Yeah.
course records.
It's not hard to do
But
in local races.
and that's when I started, yeah, exactly. And that's when I started like looking into long course, like actually like seeing what times were, learning who the people were, and and then sorry, and then that's when like I started becoming a little bit more invested personally in the sport. So I
Hmm.
started growing my social media following. So then I moved down to Charlotte to try to look for a better place to train where I could train year round. Charlotte is a great place to train. Maybe not the best place to bike, but in terms of running and swimming and even cycling, if you want to drive a little bit further out of the city, it's a great city for a triathlete.
Hmm.
Um, so I moved there, and at the time so right before I move, I go to Ohio, and very flat course, 70.3 Ohio, Delaware, Ohio, and I do another 4:30 again, and I come ninth overall or 11th overall. It was an odd number, I remember that, and I came second in my age group, and I was like, huh, like that's pretty cool, like top 10 or whatever, and I get to go to Worlds, and I did really well, and I literally drove all the way there, and then that night I drove all the way home, 7 hours, 8 hours, and then I went to work the next day.
Yeah.
That's just because I just wanted to be a trial by fire type of deal. And so I did well at that race. And so here I am again, thinking I'm hot shit. I'm going to Worlds. So then I moved to Charlotte. I start training in Charlotte. Now my job required me to travel to the Northeast 3 weeks out of the month, from Monday to Thursday. I was in sales. So from May to Worlds, basically, I would travel 3 weeks out of the month to the Northeast and still try to manage training.
That's a hard schedule to balance right there.
It's a very hard schedule balance, but you have to kind of pick your balance, because at the time you have to remember, like, I don't think I'm going to go pro at this time.
Right.
Like, this is a hobby. So like I have this great opportunity for my professional life, and I have this hobby that I'm really invested in. So how can you balance both? Well, something's got to give, because you can't have it all. So at that time, I sacrificed my training for work, Uh, and at the end of the day, you know, I went to Nice and I had a terrible race. Like I like ended up like walking the half marathon towards the end because I was just
Admittedly, Nice was a difficult course. That bike was that first like 10 miles of the bike that was just a straight climb was, I mean, that thing was absolutely brutal. Like I completely underestimated how difficult that would be. And it got pretty warm out there too. So yeah, that was,
yep.
yeah. Keep going.
But you
That's
still
actually,
like I didn't know really much about I really didn't know about nutrition and caloric intake and you know
mm-hmm.
being on the bike for 3 hours, what that could do. And you know, at the end of the day, I was just undertrained and undercalorie. Like, you know,
Yeah.
hand up, I'll take full responsibility on that. Um, and you know, a couple days after the race, while we're in Nice, I pass out. We're at a restaurant. I stand up and I pass out. I don't know what the hell happened. I'm on the floor, just like I look like a drunk, basically. And people are looking at me like, look at this American. My girlfriend, who's now my wife at the time, you know, she was like consoling me. Like we were kind of freaked out about the whole thing. So then we get back to Charlotte and it happens again where I'm at a restaurant. I go to the bathroom. I pass out in the bathroom. And I'm talking like everything just goes blank, like
Mm-hmm.
no idea what's going on. So it got to a point where it's getting scary because, you know, I'm very in tune with my body. And I just didn't know what was going on. So I go see a doctor, and he basically tells me I have the testosterone levels of like a 70-year-old man. And I start opening up to him about my lifestyle. Like, this is my hobby. This is what I do for work. This is like my schedule. And he just like looked at me. He's like, dude, you got to calm down. Like, you got to stop training. You got to eat more, because at that time I started losing muscle
Yeah.
because my body was just so exhausted. And so my aesthetic went really downhill. Like I became like fat skinny almost. And it just wasn't good compared to being ripped and lean. I didn't know it. Like you don't know these things when it's happening until it gets too late sometimes. And you're also kind of in denial, like, oh, I can manage it all. I think I was like 27 at the time. Like I can do it.
Yeah, I've been
So
living through that, managing the 9 to 5, balancing coaching, training, trying to have some other things, and just to add on to one of the points you said as far as nutrition. Nutrition is the fourth discipline in triathlon, and especially in my first few years, that was something that I severely lacked, just in training, in training and out of training. And just a important point is that like if you don't feel your body, I actually had some similar cases where I was just training so hard and so intensely that like I would get to points where I just wasn't eating enough and would pass out at times. So yeah, making sure to fuel is absolutely key for this sport, especially for endurance racing.
then I think you know, a lot of people that get in the sport get in it because they like fitness and they like health. And then you quickly realize that this is a very unhealthy sport, especially if you're trying to perform. Especially the people that, you know, like to count the macros and all of that stuff. It's like, no, 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 no. Like if you look at the top people in this sport and how they fuel themselves, you would be disgusted because you need sugar, you need
Yep.
carbs, you need calories. Yes, everything within reason
Yep.
to your effort output, but you can't have it all. You can't have the carnivore diet and expect to go nail 18-hour training weeks. You just can't
Yep.
do it. And I think that's a learning curve for a lot of people. And, you know, that's just one thing I tell them, like, listen, like, what, like, if an athlete is like, oh, I don't have the power, I'm like, what did you eat today? It's like, well, I started my first workout fasted. It's like, well,
Like
you
that's
know,
why
there's your
right
problem.
there.
Yeah, exactly. So anyways, like I had to do some lifestyle changes. So at the time, I had a buddy and he said, the same guy who got me into triathlon. And he said, why don't you try and go pro? And this is a guy who really doesn't know triathlon. You know, he got me into triathlon, but he does other things. And he kind of is on the fringe of the sport. But at the time, I had like 13,000 followers on Instagram. So I had this following. I had this niche sport that I was in love with. And he was like, why don't you try to leverage your following and try to monetize it into something? Why don't you try to become a pro triathlete? And I was thinking, I'm like, well, I don't know really what it takes to be a pro. So that's where I started like looking into it more. And this is 2019.
Okay.
And I basically came to a realization of like, maybe I could do it. So I got to a point where I was saving enough money and I was living in my own. and I hated my job for obvious reasons. It was affecting my health to a certain extent. And I can't, if I wanted to become a pro, I can't have this job. And if I want to become a pro, I have to make some compromises because I already didn't have a social life. The only reason I was dating a girl at the time is because she was in triathlon. You know, I just moved to Charlotte. I was too lazy to make new friends. So that's why I doubled down on the sport. And
Man, this sounds like a similar story.
yeah, exactly. So I basically had to like come to realization of like, you just can't have it all, dude. You got something's got to give. So I said, all right, well, the first thing's going to do is I'm going to leave my job, which wasn't easy because it was a really good job and people would kill to be in the position I was in. So what I did was I said, all right, well, that's not going to stop me from working because I have bills to pay. And even though I do have money saved, the bills will never stop. So I stopped and I stopped working, left the company, and I started looking for another job immediately. Like immediately just started looking for another job. Well, then COVID hit. So this was November of 2019, December of 2019 when I left the job. And then COVID hits like the beginning of February. And wait a second, hold on, am I getting my timeline mixed up? No, this is what happened. So I leave the job in November. Anyways, I start a new job in February of 2020. And then COVID hits. And so I have to leave the job because I was one of the first employees and they weren't going to retain me. So here I am, COVID hits. I don't have a job. I have a little bit of money saved, enough to get me through like the year or whatever. But the job market is terrible and everyone's on a hiring freeze. So I'm like, holy shit, like, did I make the right decision? Like, wow, like I could just be, it's COVID. I didn't have to travel anymore with my old job. I'm like, how stupid am I? If I just waited like another 3 months, I could have just skated by and done my job at home because my whole job was traveling and you couldn't travel anymore. So I was so angry about that. Yeah, exactly. So I was so angry about that. So long story short, my girlfriend, who's not my wife at the time, is just like, I think you could become a pro triathlete. Like, why don't you give it a go? So 2020 happens. Nothing's really on the horizon. Like, nothing's really going on.
Races are canceled.
Exactly. So around October is when I finally reached out. And this entire time, I'm self-coached. I'm buying programs. I'm on TriSetto. I'm doing 80-20 stuff. Like, you know, I think I have it figured out. So long story short, I reached out to my buddy who's a pro, but also he's been coached by some of the best coaches in the sport. And I'm like, hey, man, like, I know you're a coach. Like, why don't we work together? I want to become a pro triathlete. And he straight up told me, he's like, I think you have what it takes. Like, there's not many people that I would tell that to because I don't want to waste your time and you don't want to waste my time, but I think you could become a pro. So in October of 2020, we had this conversation. We started the week before Thanksgiving in November. And basically the goal was to test it out. And the way I was going to get a pro card was going to be the 3 scores within 107 points at the time in a calendar year.
That's one of the harder ways to do it, isn't it?
But I did exactly. But at the time, I think that was a good reachable way to do it. It is one of the tougher ways, but I think it depends how you look at it. And I'll explain how I got mine, which is a lot easier. So, so we go through. So basically what he tells me, he says, listen, there's no secret to triathlon coaching. It's the economy of workouts, speed variation in training, and consistency over time. Great. Everything we already know on paper. But to actually execute those things as an athlete is one thing. To say it's another. So literally from November, the end of November, to my first race at Eagleman, June, the first week of June, I trained 16 to 18 hours a week with taking probably 5 workouts off. And I did that for a reason. And he said to me, he goes, if you want to be a pro, you have to train at the volume of pros. You're not going to be able to pro doing 12 hours a week, which is what I was doing before. We're going to immediately get you up to 16. We're going to peak you at 18 and you're going to absorb the training. So that's what we would do. Nothing fancy. 1 hard run a week, 1 hard bike a week, 16 hours to 18 hours, and then just do it. And, you know, at first, I've never been in this kind of environment before with training in this kind of volume. So at first I was very skeptical. I'm like, hey man, I think I'm doing my runs too easy. He's like, no, you're doing your runs way too fast. You know, there's no reason for you to be running 7:30s for an hour easy run. Do 8:30s.
So that's a hard mindset to get around when you're trying to go fast. And that's one that I've definitely had to adapt and adjust to over the years is, I had a period of time where I would do my easy runs at 6:30 to 6:40, which is not an easy pace, but like I would just go out and I would just accidentally ramp up. I'd start at 7 and then I'd be like, oh, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good. And I'd start getting like faster and faster. And I'd finish the run. I'd be like, well, crap, that was supposed to be an easy run. That's not how that works. But yeah, over the years, I've learned how
Exactly. And it's an ego
Yeah.
thing too. You go on Strava and you see Christian Blumenfeld is running his easy runs at 8:30 pace, 8-minute pace, 7:50 pace. And that's the only
take the
way that
easy
your
days so
body's
that
going
you
to be
can
able
hit
to
the
absorb
hard
that
days.
training. Exactly. So when I started realizing and seeing the benefits of all that, I was like, all right, this is the math equation. Like, I mean, it's not hard. It's just consistency over time. So I did that, and then I come out at the time. I think my PR was a 4:26 at Ohio. That was what I did at Ohio, not a 4:31, whatever I said earlier. So I come out to Eagleman on a flat course, very similar to Ohio. I do a 4:07, and
Damn.
I come third
Awesome.
overall. So I saw a 20-minute jump in my time on very similar courses. So so basically I went from 4:24 to a 4:07, and that's when I realized, like, oh, I could actually become a pro. Like, I have the capability to. This is off of one training stimulus. Like, let's just get into it. So, long story short, that was my first race, got over 107. Second race was 70.3 worlds. I got like a 104, 105. Didn't have my best race. So my last race of the season was 70.3 Florida. So I go to 70.3 Florida thinking, all right, this is going to be my third race above 107, and I'll become a pro after this race. Like, it's been a great year. I went all in on triathlon this year. So this is going to be the icing on the cake. Long story short, I got DQ'd from the race. So my result doesn't even matter. And it was really discouraging because I invested so much money, so much time and effort into becoming a pro, where I basically had to start at square one. Now, I know that the rule is it's got to be within 3 calendar years. So technically, because if Eagleman was in June, I have 6 months still. But still, it's just like, shit, like I had all these plans to be a pro, like whatever. And I was moving to St. George at the time. So, the carpet just kind of got swept under the rug from me at that time. So the next plan was talking to my coach, and he was like, listen, there's other ways to get a pro card. One of them is top 3 overall at an amateur race with a pro field on the same courses as a pro with a prize purse of more than $5,000.
Yep.
So great. What race is that? Well, any 70.3 with a pro field, basically. And either St. Anthony's or LA Tri. And I'm 6 hours from Los Angeles, or 4 hours from Los Angeles. So I said, all right, I'm going to go to LA Tri because the PTO is having their race. They're putting up $100,000. There's a pro race. I looked at the course. It's the exact same course. So I was like, this is a pro qualifier. No brainer. It's an Olympic distance. I haven't done an Olympic distance since 2018. It was 2021. It was last year at the time, May 15th. So I'm like, shit. So like, all right, let's get it going. So we start training for this race, and I drive out to LA. I told my wife, I'm like, hey, she was like, I really don't want to go because, it's a 2-hour race. It's LA, like it's a 4-hour ride, 8 hours in the car. And I was like, great. Like, let me get the job done. Cause that's the mentality I had. I said, listen, I deserve to be in the pro field. I belong in the pro field. I'm going to go get the job done. And that's kind of the mentality I had. I went from being, do I belong in the pros, to I belong there because you could really hinder yourself in the sport by not thinking you belong. But if you kind of already see yourself there, you got to tell yourself there and manifest it. So I go there. I had a terrible swim. I almost pulled out of the swim. I freaked out. I haven't swam in the ocean in forever. I forgot what age group racing in a mass start felt like. It is like everyone thinks they're going to win. And the reality is, no, they're not. So we start the swim, and everyone just dead bolts in. And I'm used to, I got comfortable doing the Ironman COVID starts, self-seating, staggered time. So I'm like, holy crap, heart rate through the roof. I was just freaking out, goggles fogged. And then I was like, you know what? You came all the way out here, just get it done. So I get through the swim, I get on the bike. Long story short, I come in second with a terrible swim and bike. I just had a really good run. And so I get the pro card automatically. Monkeys off
Heck
my
yeah.
back. I'm like, oh, yeah. So now what are we going to do with it? Last 70.3, I did terrible. 70.3 worlds, I did terrible. Last time I had a good race was literally a year ago in Eagleman. Like, what do I have still? So I signed up for Boulder immediately. I was like, you know what? I just got to do it. I got to put my money where my mouth is, and can't really be discouraged, especially if you're a pro in the sport. You got to walk the walk.
Yep.
If I'm going to walk the walk, I got to go out and I just got to do it. Rip the Band-Aid off, do my first pro race. So I go out to Boulder and I come out of the
Boulder
water second to
70.3.
last.
This is your first pro race? Yeah. Boulder 70.3, first pro.
Yeah, my first.
All right. Now it was last year, right?
Watched the race there. Yeah, 2021.
Okay.
So I was out there actually watching the year before that. So I kind of know the course. Like I've ridden those roads before. I've never swam, but I've ran that run. I've biked that course. I kind of know it. So I get out there and I'm second to last out of the water of the pro field. And first of all, the camaraderie in the pro field is great. It's nothing like I expected. It's not a cutthroat dog eat dog like atmosphere. Everyone's very welcoming. Everyone's very like, they want to share the knowledge. And I mean, you realize too, when you're in this, most pros coach other pros, because going back to what I said, there's no secret sauce to triathlon training.
Right.
And coaching. There really isn't. And if a coach comes to you and says that they have the answer, that they have the secret method, they're full of shit.
Yeah.
Even the Norwegians, what they're doing isn't new. That was the fad in the 90s. It's just come back cyclically, with lactate testing. So anyways, very nervous before the swim too, just like completely nervous. I started crying during the national anthem. I had no idea how to express my emotions other than that like hit me. It was like uncontrollable, like tears. And it wasn't like anything like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm here. It was nerves. It wasn't like I'm like in shock, like I'm here. It was literally, I'm so nervous, I had to cry. So I started crying before the swim. Anyways, the gun goes off and quickly the air gets thin, even though I'm kind of at elevation, but I go from second pack to third pack to getting spit out the third pack. So I'm in no man's land. Just get through the swim. Just get through the swim. Get through the swim. I turn around. There's one guy behind me out of like 25 of us, out of 25 pros. And so immediately I just get on the bike and I just trust what I've been doing. I've been riding outdoors a lot and I destroyed the bike. I think I did a 209, 208.
That's awesome.
And just completely just kept getting to the next guy, not giving up on my bad swim, just getting to the next guy. Finally, like seeing the front pack on the turnaround, like, oh my God, like I'm not doing that bad. And then you get onto the run and it's just like, I've never pushed that hard before. I think it was 275 watts at elevation. At Eagleman, my best race to date before that, I averaged 275 on a flat course at sea level. So when I saw those data numbers when I was coming off the bike, I was like, all right, like I just really hammered that. And then you get on the run, it's a trail run, and you quickly realize
it's a trail run.
Yeah, it's a lot of that run course. A lot of that course is on dirt. So it's kind of weird. Like you're not really used to it. So, I went from like 650 pace because it was a late start. It was very hot that day, down to like 7-minute pace. And that's kind of just what I held it at. And I was like, if I could just hold this, like I'm going to have a decent race for my first pro race. I ended up coming in 17th out of like 25.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, like my coach texted me, he goes, congrats, you didn't come in last. Like that was the only goal. Just don't come in last.
Yeah.
So, I took that and that really boosted my my motivation because it puts things in perspective. It puts things in perspective to the swim start, puts things in perspective to what it takes to bike at that level. And not only that, but how to get off the bike and run to your ability. Everybody can hit their threshold number on their, Tuesday track workout. Sure. It's hard to do that in a race. And, that's something that people don't realize is like triathlon racing and training. You really should be racing you really should be training to complement your racing. And I think people manipulate their environment and training a little too much because they like to cushion it a little bit. But if you could try to simulate race training as much as possible, I feel
Hmm.
like you could easily translate that to the course, but it goes to like muscle memory and all that.
Right.
So anyways, like at that time, I had no race on the schedule. And then I was like, I got to do another race before the end of the year. So I signed up for Augusta, flat course. I could fly out there to Atlanta or whatever, and drive over. So that's what I did. And, I had very similar results, but I came 16th or 17th again out of 30. So more
Hmm.
pros,
A little bit better.
came around the same amount of time, same distance from the top, like time difference. When Trevor Foley and Jason West are running 1.9s, 1.10s, 1.11s off the bike,
Yeah.
and I'm running 1.20s, I'm already 9 minutes in a deficit off the bike, like let alone the swim and the bike. So,
Hmm.
I get what it takes to be at that level. And I'm not gonna lie to you, it blew my mind how strong you have to be on the bike. Because at this level in the
Hmm.
70.3, it's really a swim bike race. You could run a 118 or a 120 off the bike, but if you could swim in the front pack and you could bike a sub 205, you could run a 118 and still come top 5, top 10 in these races, even with the deep
Hmm.
field. We saw it at Indian Wells. It really is a swim bike race at this level.
Really? See, that's pretty interesting because I always think of it being much more of a bike run and the swim being, you know, a little bit less important because even I know if you're comparing like the pros to the amateur athletes, you know, clearly the pros are swimming at a pretty, significantly faster time than a lot of the amateurs or like the elite age groupers. But it's still, I mean, when you break it down time wise, is only generally a few minutes, anywhere from 4 to 8 minutes than the top age groupers a lot of times. And so you know having that difference in the bike and the run always seemed like it was a lot more important. But I can kind of see how maybe like part of the mentality thing of being with that front pack and then just not getting dropped and being able to sort of have that mental edge in the race to keep you in the running. Is that kind of how it lines up, or
Yeah, I mean, you want to get out of the water with the front pack so you can get on with the good bikers.
right?
Because even if people are in the second pack, those bikers are going to reach you on the bike. And if you could suck some wheel for a little bit within legal means,
Right.
that will carry you. Because you also, a lot of athletes are product of their environment, and it's one of the reasons why age group racing sucks so bad is because you're just alone and you don't know where you are with everyone else. With
Yep.
pro racing, it immediately puts you in position, you know where you are in the race, and it
Right.
takes that out of it. And it's an entire different race dynamic. It's a different sport, in my opinion.
Okay.
um, because you know exactly where you are. You could actually work with people as much as, like,
Think we froze up here.
especially for the
Oh,
bike. Because
okay.
if you're not running if you're not running sub 120 or 120s off the bike, you shouldn't be in the pro field. That's 6 minute pace. That's 6:05 pace. You just shouldn't be in the pro field at that time. So if you can't do that, then you're not going to be in the race anyways. But if you could bike a 205, if you could bike a 202, if you could swim on a regular, 1.2, if you could swim a 27, you're in the hunt. Like, you're in the hunt
Hmm.
for some money.
Yeah, you cut out a little bit in there. So sorry about that. Uh, getting all the technical difficulties in here, but I think we got the general gist. Um, one thing I did want to just quickly touch on, just in your opinion, you said it's like basically a totally different race. So comparing that first race and your other pro races as well to like the racing as an age group, what would you say are the biggest differences between those two types of races, racing as a
Between age
pro and
group
racing as an
racing.
age group?
Yeah. Um, I would say the biggest difference is an Ironman kind of did this in the beginning when you could self-seed yourself to the front in mass starts.
Hmm.
Because if you're anybody worth their grain of salt, like, you put yourself in the front no matter what, because you don't know where everyone else is behind you. So if you finish first and you try your hardest, like, that was a different atmosphere. But with this
Right.
self-seeding, with this rolling start, you're just in no man's land the entire time, and it's really
Yep.
boring. And you might be working with someone, but like what's their caliber, talent level? Like, I don't know. There's just so much that you don't know when it comes to age group racing in terms of the people around you, let alone like the packs and stuff. And just more people on the course. You know, being in the pro field, it's a more VIP experience. You're the product of your environment most of the time, but also puts just things in perspective of what it takes to be at that level. Like your get out speed in the swim needs to be there for you to make the second pack even. And that's not something that you're going to learn age group racing. You're going to
Right.
only learn that by swimming in packs and trying to get to that second pack. Like that's my goals right now. So before as an age grouper, my goals were very superficial. Win my age group, you know, go this time, you know,
Yep.
but
About where
now
I'm at
it's
right now.
exactly. But winning your age group should be a given if you want to go pro, like,
Yeah.
or at least coming top two, because you get a couple people in the age group who should be pro and just refuse. Jan Stepinski. But I think
No call outs here.
yeah, I mean, I can name it like Justin Real. I told him so many times, like, you got to go pro. You're like bullying everybody. And look at the guy goes pro and comes 5th overall at Indian Wells, like insane.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you get some of that, but like winning, you should already have that mentality if you want to go pro, because it's not about winning your age group. It's about hitting certain, for me right now, it's about hitting certain numbers. So that's getting out fast enough to hit second swim pack. I've been in second swim pack before. I've been in the middle of the second swim pack, but I haven't been able to sustain it because mentally I've gotten in my head, like, I don't know if I could do this, or
Yeah.
I hate how many people are around me. So getting through those tough times, but also like the little wins, like my only goal right now is to hold 300 watts on the bike for a
Okay.
70.3. That's literally my biggest goal right now.
Yep.
My lofty goal is to qualify for 70.3 worlds as a pro, but you know, you have to be real with yourself in the sport, and that's still like 2 years away, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, it's significantly harder, and that's something that I've been going kind of back and forth with over the past couple years. So, you know, just briefly, like I joined after college. I got into it, and I was fully sucked in. And you know, like I've had my eyes on getting my pro card for a while, but right near the beginning of 2020, I had a pretty serious injury that basically put me out for almost the entire year. And then all last year, I was working with some coaches, and you know, it got back, but it's still like, I think in Augusta, I did a 4:16, which I was pretty happy. I mean, I was happy with that. I got like 7th overall from the age groupers. That was a chance that I was kind of trying to go for my pro card during it. So I was a couple spots off. So like I was able to build back there, but a lot of what you said there is kind of what changed, and what helped me get to those new levels was, hey, don't worry about winning your age group. Worry about hitting, you know, 260, 270 watts on the bike. You know, worry about getting in that front pack, starting up front, having that mental edge. You know, those types of things are what really are what shifted in my mindset that, you know, helped me get those extra bumps, because I was stuck in those like low 420s for a couple years. Again, a lot of it was due to some like pretty severe injuries that I had. And so, but yeah, that kind of shift of goals and what you're really prioritizing, I would say is pretty key once you're starting to look at that pro level.
But you have to be honest with yourself. You do a 4:17 at Augusta, that's really like a 4:21
Right.
anywhere else. That's
Yeah.
why you have to be honest with yourself about stuff like that, because it's so easy not to be. And that's what happens in this sport is people chase the time. Like when Cozumel happened, when Christian Blumenfeld won Cozumel 2 years ago, everyone wanted to sign up for the race because everybody's friends went sub 55 for the 2.4. And my
Yeah.
buddy said that. He's like, I want to do Cozumel. I said, you want to do Cozumel so you could say that you went 10 hours in a full. And he was like, yeah. I'm like, what are you doing to yourself?
Doesn't matter. It's a fast course.
Exactly. So I
Yeah.
think if you start separating yourself away from times and all of that, and kind of just small wins will lead to bigger wins. That's
Yeah.
ultimately the and honestly, man, like there's the difference between age grouper and going pro. There's nothing in terms of my approach to the sport. And triathlon's a liability at the end of the day, no matter how you look at it. Like I'm not making money unless you're in the PTO and you're getting 5 figures just to show up. You're
Right.
not making money. If I were to go to Lake Placid and I come top 8, even though they pay out 10, I'm still not making enough money to even break even on the race.
Yeah.
So you have to look at triathlon for what it is, and you have to be honest with yourself. Like, I know for me, I haven't been in the sport long enough for me to reach to that level where I'll be invited to PTO races where I could use this as a fuel for money.
Right.
or I could use this as an earning. It's a complete liability. So the way you kind of supplement that is you get a coaching business.
Yep.
And it's why a lot of pros have coaching businesses too, is they have all this knowledge. There's a lot of bad coaches out there. There's enough of the slice of pie for everybody. So
Yep.
just carve out your little, like, community and build on that, and be able to teach people what you've learned. And that's all I do is, like, I mentor a lot of people too that are new in the sport who don't really know how to navigate it. Like, there's
Yeah.
tons of these bad age group teams that just, all it is they're money making machines to the bigger thing. And it's like, you don't need to charge 250, 300 for triathlon coaching. You don't need to pay that. I'm sorry. I charge my athletes $200 because I've been in their shoes before and I know what's being taught. There's no secret sauce.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. I mean, it really does depend. And, I've done something similar, and this is actually a pretty big stage. I've been trying to ramp up my coaching a little bit, and making a transition from from my comfy, secure job into pursuing athletics a little bit more seriously now. And a multiple different little aspects here and there. But some a couple more questions while we still got a little bit of time. You briefly got to mention some of your future goals. Can you talk a little bit more about what races you have upcoming, and really what you're shooting for? And then we'll tack on 1-2 more questions. Anything else that you'd like to add in, and maybe some advice for rising athletes?
Yeah, so I'm going through an Achilles injury right now that happened like last week. Signed up for Oceanside, and then obviously St. George North American Champs is here where I live. So those are my 2 races that I have on the schedule, and then I'll probably do a late season Ironman. It was going to be Lake Placid, but it might change to Arizona. And my goals are just they're personal to me. They're no one else is dictating my goals. I'm not trying to compare myself to anybody else. It's I got to get to the second swim pack so I can get onto a better bike pack, and then I want to hold 300 watts for 70.3. And if I could just hold on to the run, if I could hold 300 watts and run a 122, it's a great day in my book. If I could hold 300 watts and run a 119, that's even better. So my only 2 goals: second swim pack, 300 watts.
All right, awesome. I'll be making sure to keep track of your races and follow up on those, see how you're doing.
I did 290 at Augusta, and
Okay.
I overbiked for sure. So I know it's a big enough goal for me to work to, but it's a reachable goal as well.
Right. One thing I want to add on to the importance of a good bike fit. I recently just found out that my bike fit was, as described to me, disgustingly bad. And I've been biking in that form for almost a year and a half. I think that my seat had shifted at some point and I hadn't gotten it readjusted. For anyone out there, though, make sure if you're getting fit on a new bike, or just every now and then, make sure to go get a refit, because it is key just for biking health, I would say.
Yeah, I'm actually going to get a bike fit here in a couple weeks.
There you go. How often do you refit?
Not often. I mean, last time was it was right before Florida, 2021,
Okay.
2020 or something like that.
Have you been riding the same setup since then, or?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm just getting some minor changes up front, and so I just want to make sure all that looks good. But also, you become more flexible, your body changes a little more. So
Sure.
just getting that tune up. And most bike fitters, they'll offer like a comeback after a few months built into the price for free. So if anybody wants a bike fitter, a good one out of Raleigh, North Carolina is Eric Reed. He's a legacy Ironman guy, been to Kona a bunch, and he knows his stuff. He's a retooler.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks for that. And then, just lastly, what advice would you give for people getting into triathlon, and then especially those who are looking to go pro?
Okay, so anybody looking to get in triathlon, hire a coach. or go to your local tri club and just try to absorb as much information as possible, but also reach out outside of that local tri club. There's a lot of echo chambers in the sport. A lot of these local teams and stuff, it's either their way or the highway. It's really bizarre sometimes, but try to immerse yourself, especially with professionals. I was really ignorant to a lot of the stuff in the sport and the approach of the sport until I started becoming friends with pros and they started making fun of me. So I always tell people I got bullied into being a pro triathlete. I got bullied into becoming faster, which is a good thing. There's good bullying out there in the world. Look at David Goggins. He was bullied into basically becoming a SEAL. So that's one of the suggestions for anyone looking to get into the sport. Next would be, if you're looking to go pro, don't look at being pro as like the end all be all. It's just simply it's age group elite, in my opinion. Like it's nothing that's going to change your life. It might validate you personally. It might credit you in terms of maybe coaching or getting on a panel or something. But there are tons of age groupers who are faster than, and the only reason that they're not pro is maybe something going on in their life personally. Maybe it's something that, I know one guy says my parents won't approve of it. Even though I don't agree with that, that's his life and that's his decision. So, pros aren't the fastest sometimes, but also I think don't look at being a pro as like anything viable. It's such a volatile sport of triathlon in terms of money, in terms of longevity, in terms of politics. The sport is very corrupt. The more you get into it, the more you start resenting it. And that's why I started On Your Left is I don't relate to anything in triathlon. In fact, I don't like triathletes most of the time. They're very type A. They're very egotistical. No one knows how to have fun. And so what I tried to do is take skateboarding culture, take trail running culture, take mountain bike culture, bring that into triathlon, because I have so many friends that left the sport because of how bad the culture is. Just check your ego. There's always somebody faster. That's my advice. If you want to go pro, make sure you're there physically. It's easy to get a pro card. Okay. The guy who came in third was 15 years old. He technically got his pro card. Okay. That goes to show you how easy it is to get a pro card in triathlon if you strategically get it. That was my goal. The goal was like, well, I think I belong here. Let me get it. So I went and I literally picked out the easiest race you can get it at, LA Triathlon. But it was a gamble I was willing to take because I went to my first 2 pro races and I beat pros that have been in the sport for 4 or 5 years. And I'm like, I'm beating these guys. I belong here.
Yeah. For me, I want to help race against some of the best, and you get to do that as an age group athlete a little bit. But yeah, I want to be out there with the pros as well. Just something that a lot of it is personal validation and just like the concept and the idea of being pro. And that's one of my personal goals there. But yeah, I think that you've got some good feedback on that about making sure you have the right intention and mindset about doing it.
Yeah, listen, if you're not swimming sub 29 minutes, and this is a neutral course, if you're not swimming sub 29, if you're not biking sub 215, if you're not running sub 125, there's no reason for you to be a pro.
Yeah.
Just because you will literally become dead last in every race. Even at this level, you still have to show some kind of fitness, even on bad days. Like it's just kind of discouraging too, because the most effort to get the least amount of return is that swim, but it's so valuable in the pro field.
Right.
But you have to be honest with yourself and you have to make the jump when you're ready. Otherwise, it could hurt you in the long run because you're embarrassing yourself. And then you become that pro who shouldn't be a pro. And no one likes that guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the word pro is very weird. It's because we're not like there are very few people in the sport that are earning enough money to live off.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely a little bit of a pain point and something that's, hard to realize is that even though a lot of the people that are in triathlon are generally, and they have a lot of money going into it, there's not a lot of money going towards the pros, which is pretty unfortunate and hopefully something that we'll see a change in. And it sounds like PTO is at least starting to sort of champion that change. And, hopefully we'll see more of that going into the future. Because again, if you're doing this as a pro, if it is your profession, you should be at least able to sustain yourself on it. So hopefully those are some changes that we'll see going into the future.
I would tell you right now, I have a coaching business. I also have an actual job. I work for a tech company, and I would never even think about leaving my job again to go to triathlon
Hmm.
because you get injured once and reality hits you pretty hard. You're like,
Yeah.
holy shit, like I'm that close to not even being able to train. And it puts things in perspective. And honestly, it's not hard to be a tri coach. You spend a couple hours on the weekend programming, you answer a few emails. How many hours a day are you training as a pro triathlete? I'm training at max during the week, maybe 2.5 hours, 3 hours on like a really heavy day. What
Hmm.
else are you doing? Like, I talk to my buddies who are friends with pros who don't have jobs and aren't even in the PTO top 100. And he's just like, I don't know what this guy does with all his time. Like, you can only train so much in a day.
Right.
So honestly, having a job is, you see Olympians with jobs, is
Yep.
will keep you sane, will give you purpose in life. Like just having your whole life being triathlon. Listen, this sport is not big enough. Nobody knows who Gustav Eden is. Nobody knows who Christian Blumenfeld or Jan Frodeno is outside of Germany, Norway, or triathlon.
Right. Not yet. Maybe one day. Maybe one day we'll get big enough. We'll
Hey,
see.
let me let
There'll
me
have to be
let
some
me
changes in the sport and how it is advertised and televised and all of that. There's going to have to be some changes that get more people interested into it.
Well, let me ask you this. Ed Baker, one of the biggest investors, started Uber, age group triathlete. He goes to invest in triathlon, doesn't invest in triathlon, invests in a product that sells into triathlon. So I asked myself, you got this guy, such a good businessman, millionaire. He put his money anywhere. Why wouldn't he put it in triathlon? He put it into
Hmm.
a product that sells into triathlon because triathlon doesn't make money.
Yeah.
Triathlon makes zero. If you're a race director, if you're anything in triathlon and business, you make no money. It's everything's a liability.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's a I think it's a realization that's kind of on the back burner and for some people who are really, really into it. Um, and again, I personally, I love the sport. I hope that, at some point that changes. Who knows if it will? I guess we'll find out. Time will tell.
yeah, I mean, you got a kid. I follow these YouTubers. You got a kid. He left his job at Garmin, and his PR is a 4:35 to go pro and do YouTube content.
Yeah.
No, man, you gotta. Who is advising you to do that? First of all, so I think there's a lot of disillusion and a lot of infatuation of I want to be a pro athlete. I want to have I want to have it all. But the reality is you got to do a lot of shit in life that you don't want to do to get to where you want to be.
Yeah.
Um, and me right now, I don't want to be working my job. I wish I could be a pro triathlete and pay the bills off pro triathlon, but I need a job.
Yep. Yep. I've been in a similar boat. I actually am in the boat though, where I'm leaving my job, but there's other stuff around that too. So I'm excited. I've got a couple different things in the works. But getting this series off is one of them that I'm super excited about. Getting to share your stories. And again, I really appreciate you coming on, getting to share your first year as a pro, how you got to where you are. Do you have any last minute things?
No, if you don't follow On Your Left, it's onyourleft.triathlon on Instagram. Our website is On Your Left, ONYERLEFT, one word, .store. And we are actually releasing, we're pivoting as a brand. We're basically getting out of triathlon products and we're basically becoming a run product company.
Okay.
We're in the process of testing out, split shorts, run tights, run tanks, trail hats, all of that stuff. So, that's part of the reason is, running is such a bigger market than triathlon. And
Mm-hmm.
in running, you don't really have to spend a lot of money on things. When
Yep.
triathlon, you have to spend this is a ton. So yeah, On Your Left, give it a follow.
There you go. Well, you stole the line. I was going to ask you what you say when you pass people, but you already heard it. On Your Left. That's going to wrap it up for this episode of First Year Pros. I want to thank Conor again for coming on, and I'm excited to race with you in the future and see where you go. There were a couple technical difficulties, including the ending not getting recorded. So again, I apologize for that. I didn't catch it until the post editing. The part that got cut out was a little bit of conversation on Conor's brand On Your Left. So if you're interested in checking that out, There's links in the description below, as well as links to Conor's personal profile if you want to go follow his journey too. So with all that, this is a community that supports each other. Give each other a follow, and happy training.